mean, did anybody have any idea of the devastation a tornado could do?
Not to my knowledge.
I was
The
just
one-
curious.
The one happened in 1935, that was the one that got a Tupelo resident attention. They never seen anything like that before. They never had that type of experience because after that, my grandmother talked about it. My uncle talked about it, all those things. And from that woke us up, that woke Tupelo up. Those who stayed in town, those who stayed out of town, because some of the result. You could go back over there where the international chemical plant called the Full Life Factory. They blew that last part off where the acid plant, where they went across that way. Then you could go over there, because I used to hunt. I did rabbit hunting later on in my younger years with a tap stick. It's called a tap stick, killing rabbit. You could go over there where Johnson Brothers, Tupelo, and you could find tin, all this stuff wrapped around trees. You could find sticks and stuff stuck in the ground like a Indian was shooting spears. That's where you know that's where it was. And people never had that type of experience before. The farmers who were fucking the Alaries who were farming over there, they had to change. Johnson Brothers had to change some of their activity because of it carried some of the stuff from here back to the west over there, to the east, I mean, over there. And it was just awesome. You could see things like that.
We'll have Mr. Keeney introduce himself and tell us a little bit about that storm front.
Sure. My name is David Keeney. I teach meteorology down at Mississippi State. It was a very warm, blustery day. The official temperature in Tupelo only hit 75 that day, but just to the north in Boonville, it actually hit 85. So you had a wide range of temperatures. It just depended where it rained, where it didn't rain, if it was cloudy, sunny. The main storm system that caused this tornado and a few others around it was centered in eastern Oklahoma at the beginning of the day, and to show you how fast it was moving, it moved into the Great Lakes and off into Canada by the end of the day. So it was really moving. It averaged about 45, 60 miles per hour. There were predominantly 4 thunderstorms that were responsible for all of the tornadoes that occurred on April the 5th, 1936. The first one was actually in Arkansas around 3 p.m. That was really close to the low. And then the next one was in western Tennessee, and we had one that was just north of here. And then finally, this tornado that struck here was the last one of the day. And its parent thunderstorm began actually in the Delta, and it formed there. The first record of the tornado touching down was near Grenada Lake, near Bryant, Mississippi, and that was about 8 o'clock that evening. And of course, it made its way up to here around 9 o'clock. We don't know for sure that there was actually a tornado on the ground for that entire path, but it resulted from the same thunderstorm, produced that tornado and this tornado. So it came through town, and it was a very powerful tornado. It was rated an F5, which means that it had winds over 250 miles an hour, basically. And it did some interesting things in terms of damage around in town, as you guys can attest to. Like, you're talking about the size of the hail that was golf ball to tennis size hail. There's a lot of reports of people losing their roofs and windows being knocked out just by the hail, not necessarily even by the tornado. So it was a very powerful storm system. And it's a really interesting tornado. It was about 300 yards wide when it came through Tupelo. And to give you an estimate of how large that is, if you went from crosstown and then went to where your house is at the intersection of Allen and Gloucester, that's about the width of the tornado, about 300 yards as it was going through the town. And it took from the southwest to the northeast. Right where we're at right now would be on the southern edge of the funnel as it was coming through of the tornado. And so if you can imagine 250 mile per hour winds 75 years ago right here, it's pretty amazing. The most powerful tornadoes, we always think of a tornado as one entity, one funnel. This one was powerful enough that it's a tornado, sure enough, but then it has little tornadoes inside of it. And that's where you get some of those really unusual damage reports where one house isn't touched and the other one's completely gone. And this is one of those tornadoes, a very powerful tornado. Not only that, but you have the main damage path that went through Tupelo, but again, in really powerful tornadoes, sometimes you'll have what's called a satellite tornado. And that's, if this is your main tornado, you'll have a really skinny tornado that'll rotate around the main tornado, completely separate from it. And in some of the damaged photos, you can see on South Spring Street this occurred, and then some other places where it crossed Maine. A really small tornado, it was only about 75 yards wide, but it went around this larger tornado, so it was a very destructive storm. It hit Tupelo around 9 o'clock, continued going north, and we have damage reports from that thunderstorm and either that tornado or another one caused by that thunderstorm all the way into central Tennessee through 11 p.m. So we know the thunderstorm that produced the tornado that came through here, it started somewhere around 8 o'clock in central Mississippi, and it persisted in producing tornadoes all the way until it got into south central Tennessee at around 11 o'clock. So it was a very potent storm system.
We've had stories, I've read it in some of the files here at the library, where people had items returned to them from Gainesville, Georgia, that was picked up in the storm. Can you explain any of that?
Sure. What happens is with a tornado, you have a lot of air that it's rushed into the tornado, and then it gets taken aloft. It can go, 50, 60,000 feet in the air. And if it's something lightweight, like a piece of paper or even someone's jacket, that takes a long time to make its way back down to the surface of the earth. Like for instance, the water tank, the 100,000 gallon water tank that was destroyed, they found pieces of it 6 miles west of here. I can't remember the exact name of the town, but they found pieces of that water tank. That's a substantial structure, and so that's a lot of wind. So it gets sucked into the tornado, gets up into the thunderstorm, and just stays aloft. And they found some things well over 100 miles away in central Tennessee, I think it was, some return checks from some of the banks.
Beginning with Mr. Thank you, David. Beginning with Mr. Reed, I'd just like to ask each of you, how did it change your life?
Well, I'm scared of high winds these days. Well, I guess you have to look at, take a broader answer. I was in the house at the time. If I go back and momentarily bring you up to date on the personal experience. My mother and father and I had come home from church. The other boys were out somewhere. And when my mother had gone up just before the tornado hit to shut the windows on the second floor, which is the wrong thing to do. Dad had gone to shut them in the back, and the tornado hit. Mama got down the stairs, got hurt a little bit, but the neighbor's furniture came right through our 6-inch brick wall, coming through one side of the house and just missed Dad. Piano came out of there and just missed Dad about that far, I think. It came whirling across the house on him. But we got there, we huddled by the front door. Dad said, well, wait, should we go outside or stay inside? He decided we're safer inside. Thankfully, we were. The whole roof of the house was outside where we were going. But as David said, and Nathaniel, it was like hundreds of freight trains coming up the yard. Really, it was a terrible noise. And then the tornado hit. Well, when it was over, just briefly, it was deadly quiet. We thought everybody in town was dead. It was just unearthly quiet. And stayed there for a while until the first thing we heard, but we didn't know whether we could get out or not, my Uncle Word's voice said, Hoyt, Bob, and he had climbed over the stuff. He'd lived down the street from us and come up, and that was the sweetest voice I'd ever heard. So it changed my life and my appreciation of my Uncle Word, Roy, for one thing. But I learned a lot from what happened that night with my business. Dad went immediately to the store. Incidentally, my mother was about to go crazy to find out about the other two boys. They were Boy Scouts. They came back. They were helping in the street. Bob was from the Episcopal Church in a car, which a tree fell in front and behind, and with the mother, they were blocked in there. Bill was just up the street in a house that was also half demolished. with a group from the church. But they stayed out as Boy Scouts working during the night, and I stayed in the rest of the night. We all stayed up all night. Dad rushed down to the store, opened the store as quickly as he could. We then had a bedding and blanket department there, and clothes, and he told people just to take what they needed and pay them when they could. I think that was the attitude all over town. There were no people taking the word, it escapes me at the moment though, but stealing and all that sort of thing was going on. We didn't experience that back in those days in Tupelo. People were good to each other. And you learn to appreciate people and what they go through at a time like that. I think we grow out of it better, having gone through a disastrous event, and realize that life goes on after those things happen. But it was a good experience to the town. Tupelo grew back better after that. And honestly, to divert again briefly, that the economy was not that much damaged. What happened was that the insurance company's money were going to the people who were building houses. And the government did, although we didn't get all the aid you had now, we did get several $1 million from the federal government. And from the Red Cross I appreciate the Red Cross, that's one thing I learned. They did a wonderful job for us. And those things were memorable. And so I think the town did build back in the financially. It was in the Depression, so many people out of work, there was no dearth of workers, carpenters, or they were just, plenty of people, enormous amount of construction going on, which was a very good thing. But honestly, you go through something like that, you appreciate the fact, even as a boy, you appreciate very clearly that life doesn't go on forever. And people in church, I remember after that, the Howery preached and on the song, some people thought the devil had sent the tornado, and some said God had the tornado. So there was that thing you have to think about things like that. In nature, I think nature sent the tornado. But it just gives you a little different perspective. I think that you carry all through your life, makes you appreciate your family. The fact that you live through it together, that's important.
Thank you. Mr. Stone, how has your life changed or affected?
As being a young man, 6 years old at that time, and I can tell you what it did for my mother. And my mother took my brother and I, just like, you know how a chicken put a hen, put a little chicken on the wing. When it got cloudy and thunder, we moved, I stayed before, more than the pillow. She was going over here, we go over here where she thought, she'd be much safer. And that right there made us aware when you hear thunder, lightning, something like that strike, you talking about if you were making noise, you got quiet in that house. You could hear a pin fall in there because they demanded that the other people made sure that you had to be quiet. And they told us one time that when we heard thundering out there on the thing, and they had us drive a wedge in the ground to listen and said the devil is whooping his wife. They had us thinking that. We listened to the thundering and all that stuff going there. It was eye-opening for everybody here in Tupelo that can remember. And I can tell you, you see, Lee County, not Lee County, but Lee County Training School. That was a school where they trained, it wasn't college, that was Lee County Training School, and that's where a lot of people who went to school there at Lee County Training School, they got the education. They would get something like a B license that they could finish right there. Mr. Radley house right there, Miss Brownlee house right there. And when you go to college, there was a bridge that you walk across up to where the Illuminati hut over there. And down you see down in that hall there, that old car, they threw cars and junk things all in there. Mr. Radley over there, with his gym at over there now, where the old gym used to be, that's called a trash pile. And, take those, buildings who had, and people who cleaned up Tupelo, the trash truck would clean up, they would bring it through over there and dump it over there. Mr. Radley had a big hog pen built off down there, and those hogs would feed, come with their feed, and when they come to eat all the stuff that they would throw up there, and then they would go back down and get in the pen. It was just something, they took advantage of it. And using that, the trash, they call it trash pile. And we used to go over there and dig in it. And some of the big stores downtown, like your store, Hine Brothers, would throw away stuff over there. We be over there and we find some of those aristocrat people who threw away things in town. We be over there digging, we found shoes, women found stockings and all those kind of things, and they used them. You take people car there when they had too many bananas and things like that, that truck would bring over there and dump them. And we used to get those stalks, green stalks. A lot of people take those green stalks and take them and tie them up in the house. And the bananas were turned what? Yellow. And those kind of things, we learned something from it. Took advantage of it. The elder people, they took advantage of it. Because of the tornado of 1936, those who knew what was going on, and we who grew up knew what was going on. Weiner's shoe store used to be downtown. That's where I bought my Buster Brown shoes. Pair of shoes I had, Buster Brown shoes. I love those shoes because my feet was off the ground.
You guys were recycling before everybody else caught on, weren't you?
Roy Bob was working down with distributing clothes. Clothes came from everywhere. And I noticed he'd go there in the morning, and every night he came home with a different coat on. He's just, there was plenty of clothes down there, some new, some used. But you really did, there was a real feeling of community that came out after Tupelo. Tupelo was stronger after that. It had hit black and white about the same. In Boxcar City, they had a black and white Boxcar City. But there were people in the hospital, of course, virtually no hospital, but everybody suffered together. Everybody was treated alike. As I said, the Red Cross did that too. It was a great sense of unity, and I'm sure in my mind that what we call the Tupelo spirit was really enriched, if not just birthed.
Would you say that night was an equalizer of everyone in the community? Suddenly everybody was equal?
Yes, I think so. It was. It makes a difference. And the humanity that was shown and the attention was shown. You read about these big tsunamis and all that world, and the response to those is great, but when you're in a situation that actually has it, people were calling from everywhere, from Memphis, and people, towns that were in Mississippi that were our competitors were helping us. The supervisors came in to work and put their people to work in town, clearing the streets. There was some good stuff come out of the tornado.
David, how did it change your life?
Well, I don't know. That's hard to say. It's really hard for me to say. We got through that, and I felt like the Lord had watched over us. He watched over us all. I know that, but it was. I don't know. When we have a wind now, a storm, something of the sort, I don't get panicky. In fact, I just feel like what will be, will be. I know I work at the Justice Building now, and we have people, when a big cloud comes up or something like that, some of the girls go over to the courthouse. They think that's such a wonderful building, you know, and they're gonna be saved in there, and I feel like if I'm gonna be saved, I'm gonna be saved, and I'm there. I'm ready anytime. I know, talking about people's attitudes and things like that, Daddy realized back after a few days, he was furnishing mattresses and things like that, being in the furniture business. And he canceled, I think it was about $70,000 worth of debts. Just wrote them off the books because he realized that people were going other places. And he had it published that those debts were free and accounts were free, and that he wanted his people back, and they came back in droves. And that's all I can.
Most of the stores cut prices rather than raise them. I think that in this book here, the mention from the mayor acknowledged that fact that most of the stores had reduced prices rather than raise them in that office.
That's right.
Which I think is a typical attitude people had back in those days. It's
Quite different from now.
I think so. I think so. And it's a great lesson to people. The bad things happen to good people. The Lord didn't pick it. He didn't save me and David and kill the Burrs family. You know that. I know it. Maybe you don't know it. But I'm telling you. And you know that. I know that. And those things make a difference to you. And your philosophy of life after life, you learn a lot from an experience like that. That sticks with you always, Roy, in more ways than you know.
It even sticks with your kids. I didn't know anything about the tornado when I was 4 and 5 years old, but in a bad storm, about the time I'd get all snuggly and asleep, my daddy would finally get the wild hair to drag us out through pouring down rain to the storm house, which is several yards from our house. And that's what I remember about storms. That was his fear, because when he was 17, their house was blown away, but they were in the storm house and protected. But I had to live with the wrath of that storm for years before he finally got over his fear. Yes, sir, Mr. Stone.
You could tell that from that tornado, at Carver School, everybody knew something about tornado drill. When they had a tornado drill, you talking about you fall out and you get away from the window, you get over near the wall here and lay flat down and be quiet. And wasn't any talking going on. You was quiet as a gnat. You know what I'm talking about. And until they gave it over. See, our old principal, Mr. S.L. Radley, he was in that tornado, and we practiced. Everybody knew that tornado drill. Every teacher practiced with a student. You group in this class here, when we're hollering, you going over there, stopping, laying down, put your hand over your head, get books. You put books over your head for protection. And so those things, it helped us until now. And a lot of churches, our church up there, later on, they started, those who had basements, they had shelter places. You could go down to the courthouse, go down and go in there. And those people who had them, in our church Spring Hill, you could come there and go down in the basement. Other churches who have basements, you could go there. So they practiced that and opened our eyes here and made us more aware of what the Lord did do. What he did, he protected us. And well, the Lord didn't do all the killing. That was part of Satan. You know, that's part of his tactic. He was doing that. And that made us much holier. You talking about people on Sunday they went to church. They went to church. I'm talking about you didn't have to worry about it. But now, I don't say if you need another tornado to get back to church. I'll tell you what it did. It sure changed their concept and their attitude. Thinking, and I look at it, when I look out, other night, I was watching, I was looking in the window. and I looked over here, and I didn't say anything, but I thought about 1936.
Mr. Keeney, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
It was from a meteorological perspective, it was a crazy storm. It's still the fourth deadliest storm in terms of tornadoes. And Mississippi is actually prone to tornadoes, big tornadoes. Out of the top 10 deadliest tornadoes, we have number 2, number 4, and number 7 on that. And so we have some really massive tornadoes. And just from my perspective, it's amazing to hear the wisdom and the knowledge that's being spoken today from the survivors of it. And for me, I'm not from Tupelo. I'm from Dallas, Texas, big city and all that kind of stuff. And so to see the spirit of Tupelo and for you guys to talk about it, I think it's really amazing that how you guys pulled together and in Mississippi when it was racially divided and everything, how people just came together and it didn't matter. Everybody went through that together. For me, that's the story of this tornado is the spirit of Tupelo and how it survived and pressed on.
Well, we want to thank all of you gentlemen for sharing your stories with us.
Everybody, would you join me in giving a special round of applause to Roy Turner, who made this flow so well. Roy and Jim Palmer did the classic documentary about Tupelo, and Roy has duplicated that, and that is for sale in the back of a room here for $20, and anyone who chooses to buy that today, the proceeds from that will benefit the library today, thanks to Roy. And Roy, we appreciate that very much. If you don't have Marty Ramage's classic tornado history that Mr. Jack has there, we have that for sale in the back too for $10, which at least for today, Reed's Gumtree's bookstore will match for today. You can buy it here for $10 as well, and everyone, there's going to be a brand new documentary tomorrow night by Terry Swindle, who's in the back of a room that'll be at the Link Theater. Thank all of y'all for coming today, and please come up front and visit for just a moment. Thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you. Good. Hey, Doc. Fantastic. Yeah, back there, just look at kill him.
The graduation, I really can't, I wasn't graduating. Yeah. But we did meet, we met out there, and I can't recall going to classes. I think we just met out there, they called.
How you doing? Hey, y'all filled in today. I usually do the videography here. I've passed.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all stepping in. Yes, sir. Y'all did a good job there.
I consider Willis Heights anywhere from where that West Lane Shopping Center is on.